All right, we're recording. We're live. It is December 15th, 2022. After you get past the age of 35, you start losing track of the years. I guess there's just too many of them. Okay, so we got a lot of good stuff to talk about tonight. We're going to start off with some general stuff, and then we're going to get into some specific stuff because of the questions and the issues I'm handling over the past couple weeks. Sorry about last week. I just was not up for a call. I had been on the phone with folks for 3 days straight and did not have the energy to focus. It wasn't going to happen. So what we'll probably do is move more towards me just doing videos. The goal is to do a website. Got to get that off the ground because I'm at a point where I think I could help more folks by doing a website and writing books and whatever, rather than just engaging in one-on-one all day. Although the folks that are coming to me lately teach me more than I teach them. And so that cannot be like, that's just divine. I mean, people coming to me with information, I can't turn that down, right? However, learning this stuff does take a while. I mean, it's almost like, it's like running a moonshine still. You make beer, you heat it up, you collect the vapors and reconstitute them, you condense them back into alcohol, right? It's very simple. Anybody with basic lab equipment can do that, right? However, when you really get into the nuts and bolts of it, it gets complicated, right? It's the same thing with auto mechanics. The way an engine works is fairly simple. I can give you how the internal combustion engine works in a heartbeat. But when you start rebuilding an engine, or having to replace a transmission, things get a little bit more detailed, right? I can quickly tell you what the engine does. I know where it's at. I know where the transmission is at. But, if you get a phone call and somebody says, hey, my car's not running right, what should I do? That's like somebody saying, hey, I got a court case. What should I do, right? Or even worse, this actually may be more accurate. Hey, I've never really stepped in a boxing ring before. I'm getting ready to step in a boxing ring. And Todd Philbrook, man, you're going to have to flip over your camera, man. You're upside down. That's hilarious, but I won't be able to get my brain off of it.
I don't know how to fix it.
That's all right then. As a quick aside, have you guys seen the video where the attorney joins the Zoom court and he's got a filter on, so he's like a cat. He's literally like it changes him to a cat, so he looks like he's a talking cat. And so it's hilarious. If you do Zoom court talking cat on YouTube, you'll find it. Great for a laugh because he doesn't know how to turn it off. And so he basically has to appear as a cat. Anyway. So if somebody were to call you and say, hey, look, I'm getting ready to step into a boxing ring. What should I do? That's the kind of calls I get oftentimes, right? Like people contact me and they say, my kids, CPS is on the way to take my kids. What should I do? I mean, and ideally what we want to do though, is it's just like emergency medicine, or it's a really bad time to call somebody and ask what to do when you're facing an amputation. Like you've just had your hand cut off and you call somebody, what should I do? You should know how to stop the bleeding right then, right? And you can save yourself a lot of crap down the line by doing the right thing early on. Of course, that's not always possible. That's not how we humans work. Even I put stuff off. And so one of the first things I'm going to talk about, I'm going to explain what happens when you get caught up in the system, because the people on this call may have been caught up in the system. Okay. Until you've been caught up in the system, it's really hard to understand it. It's like trying to explain what it's like to stand on top of Mount Everest, or it's what's it like to grow and birth a child. As a man, I can never understand that. I mean, I can get close, but I can never truly understand that because I've never done it. And a lot of folks think that they're safe from being pulled into the system, and that's not ever true, ever. The commercial world is all around us. We're in it. That's like saying you can jump in the middle of a pool, but you don't have to worry about getting wet. You don't have to worry about swimming. Or you can say, well, I'm going to get in the pool, but I'm always going to stay in the shallow end. Okay. Now, if you're going to be in the pool at all, you got to learn how to swim. You should. Otherwise, you could drown. And it's the same way with this system that we have set up. I've known a lot of cops. I've done federal work. I've been a federal agent, federal investigator. I've done a bit of municipal police work. I've had a lot of friends who are both military intelligence, federal intelligence folks, federal agents, and municipal police officers. I once knew a fellow who spent about a year and a half with a drug task force down in Texas, where they knock in doors and bust down doors and go in and get people. Did you know that more than half of all people who's subjected to a raid like that, a no-knock raid, crap themselves and pee themselves? I mean, it's a very difficult thing to go through. And here's the thing, they don't always do it perfectly. They often make mistakes. You can just have an address that they screwed up. So they were supposed to hit the guy at 267 Smith Street, and you're at 276. And guess what? At 3 a.m., you're sitting on your couch watching a movie, and the next thing you know, flashbangs are coming in and you're getting jerked out of your house. And I'm not fear mongering here. All I'm doing is just stating what is a fact. It's actually a very common thing. And you may not know anybody that's had it happen to them, but every day they do no-knock raids. Every day people get arrested. They don't always arrest the right people. They don't always knock on the right doors or knock down the right doors. Okay. So it's better to plan these things out in the beginning, okay, before you have any trouble, than it is when you're already in the mess. You know, it's just like trying to stop the bleeding and learning how to do first aid when you're already in a car wreck, you're missing an arm and you're in shock. Okay. So it'd be better if you could do the things that would help you. And I'll tell you the things that could help you. Okay. Number one, okay, and I'll explain the reason I know this. I was subjected to my own raid. Okay, I was involved in a custody case. A lot of y'all know this from previous videos. And as a result of this custody case, which wasn't mine, it was someone I was with, I ended up with a federal indictment thrown in my lap, and I kind of knew something was coming. I couldn't have forecasted what. I was fairly prepared, but I wasn't as prepared as I would be nowadays. Matter of fact, we wouldn't even get that far nowadays. However, I ended up in jail, ended up facing a federal indictment. I beat it. However, I saw a glimpse of what it's like in the system. Now, I've been on the other side of that fence, but that was my first time on that side of that fence, and it really brings it home. There's nothing like standing. You want a humbling moment? Stand in a federal courtroom in front of a judge in an orange jumpsuit with chains on your shackles on your wrist and ankles. And so I'm not deluding myself. I'm not afraid of being pulled into that particular part of the system again. Matter of fact, if it happened now, I'd probably be fairly relaxed about it. I mean, it's not comfortable. It's not fun, but I mean, it's like if you were to pick me up and drop me out in the middle of the woods somewhere. I mean, it wouldn't be comfortable. It would be fun, but would I survive? Yeah. And I'd learn a lot from it. You know, we learn not in a place of comfort. We learn in a place of discomfort. Okay. But the first thing you need anytime you're going to face challenges in life is you need community. If you've not built yourself a community, you need to do so. I have a propensity to self-isolate. It's very easy for me to do that. Stick me in a cabin in the middle of the woods, I'd be perfectly happy, right? If I never saw anybody for a year, would I miss people? Yeah. Could I do it? Yeah. Would I enjoy it? Yeah, actually, I probably would. So all my life, I forced myself to do the opposite, which is what I'm doing here, because as of about a week and a half ago, I wanted to stop doing this stuff. Like I just reached my high water mark on it, and I was ready to just back away and say I'm not, because the problem is not only are the problems, the things that come at me, other people's challenges, when they grab hold of someone like me, and if you get the knowledge to do some of this stuff, you might very well be this guy or girl or woman, man. They'll grab onto you like a drowning person. Okay. And I understand that, because back in the day, if I'd have had someone to grab onto, I would have too. And I did not. And that was a mistake. I should have had a community. I should have known what was coming. I shouldn't have been sitting in jail wondering who was going to take care of my dogs or feed my chickens or take care of my horse. So understand that when you get pulled into the system, you don't get a phone call. Everybody talks about, well, I get one phone call. Unless you've got money on the books for that particular jail, you don't get a phone call. You don't get squat. Anybody that thinks you get one phone call, no, you don't get that. While I was waiting in the waiting area in the county jail that I was in, a girl came in. She walked over to a payphone. She picked up the phone, and I'd already tried this. I picked up the phone and tried to dial. You have to enter a calling card number. I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember the calling card days, but they want a number. And she entered 30 numbers. Next thing I know, she's talking to somebody. She said, "Mom, I'm down at the jail. Please come get me." I got picked up. So she comes over and sits down, and we weren't supposed to talk to each other. But I said, "Hey, how'd you make a phone call?" She said, "Oh, honey, She says, you're a white boy. She said, you ain't ready for this stuff. She said, I'll keep money on the books at the jail. Well, that's an ideal. So there's three things that the government will not like you doing. Okay. It's perfectly legal to do. Okay. Number one is learn all this stuff, this contracting, how it's all based on contract. Okay. You need to learn about citizenship. You need to learn about what makes a valid contract. You need to learn all this stuff that I'm sure the folks that are in this call right now understand what I mean by this stuff. Number two, you need to form a community. Okay. They do not like it when we get together and form groups. Now, it's okay if the group you're forming is pro Planned Parenthood. It's okay if the group that you're forming is a group to do drag queens down at the library to do readings to children, right? It's okay if the group that you're forming is Black Lives Matter. Why? Because those things are all approved. Why are they approved? Because they're no danger to the establishment, right? What isn't approved? What isn't approved is you getting together and studying with a group of like-minded folks. I don't care what color you are, okay? So you need a community. The next thing you can do to make yourself more trouble to mess with than you're worth is you need to understand how to file a claim, okay? Understand how to perfect a claim. The most power that you're ever going to have in the system is understanding how to perfect a claim, okay? Now, resources. The great thing about having the internet is that the internet enables you to build a community, even if that community is not local, right? So what you want, what you may want to consider shooting for is setting up a community, and it can just be you and another person, or 2 or 3 people, or 4 or 5. It's whatever that you can do. And get a shared drive and start thinking about what kind of documents that you guys want to have ready to file before you get into trouble. Okay. Give me just 1 second. So it's this much easier to have the dog right beside me so that he's not doing his thing. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Shared drive. Okay. Think about what kind of motions you would want to file into a court case for yourself before you actually go to court. Okay. As you learn more about the assumed name stuff, as you learn more about the jurisdictionary stuff, as you learn more about the system, more things are going to become apparent to you. The more you know, the more solutions you have. One of the ways to gauge whether or not you're advancing in your knowledge is help other people out. And when those other people come to you, you'll suddenly have a myriad of solutions. There are things that I couldn't answer a year ago that now is no problem to me. Okay. The only problem with helping other folks is if you're their lifeline, or if you're the one that they're looking to, they automatically assume you know everything. And that's almost impossible to do in the system, right? So the other thing is citizenship. How do you know you're a U.S. citizen? Ask yourself that. How do you know you're a U.S. citizen? That's one of the things I like to ask other people. How do you know you are a U.S. citizen? A lot of people will say, well, I know I'm a U.S. citizen because I was born in the United States. So I ask them where they were born at. And they would say, well, I was born in Ohio. Okay, so you were born in Ohio, or you were born in the state of Ohio? They're like, well, it's the same thing. No, it's not. Okay, and neither one of those is the United States. The United States is a completely different thing. There's Supreme Court rulings on what the United States actually means. They'll say, well, I have a United States birth certificate or certificate of live birth. Okay, show it to me. Okay, that says state of Ohio at the top. It says Commonwealth of Massachusetts at the top. That is not a United States birth certificate. Okay. And they may say, well, it's part of the United States. No, a United States birth certificate should say United States at the top, I would think, right? So how do we know you're a U.S. citizen? They say, well, I have a passport. Yeah, but you have to verify that you're a U.S. citizen before you get the passport. So the passport can't be the proof that you're a U.S. citizen, okay? The only thing that shows that you're a U.S. citizen is your assumption that you're a U.S. citizen. Try writing using the FOIA stuff, Freedom of Information Act. Try writing some entities and ask them if they have any records that show that you're a U.S. citizen. One of the entities I recommend that you try to write is United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. If anybody should have records on U.S. citizenship, it should be USCIS. You can do the thing online. You can go to USCIS and you can do the FOIA request online, and you can request any records pertaining to evidence that you're a U.S. citizen. You won't get a positive response. They won't come back with a record and say, yes, you're a U.S. citizen. Have you ever thought about why they want us to vote so badly? They want us to vote, not because everybody needs to do their civic duty, right? So my computer is set up so that my internet address is from Georgia, okay, because I use a cell modem just to get internet where I'm at. And I get all the Georgia ads, all the political ads that came from this past political season. And one of the ads that came up the other day was an ad that said that they were trying to shame people into voting. They said, there's not any law that, there's no way that anyone can look and see who you voted for. But people can look up and see whether or not you voted. Don't be that guy. Go out and vote. And you got to ask yourself, why do they want you to go out and vote so badly? The reason they want you to go out and vote so badly is, what have you got to do in order to go vote? You have to confirm you're a U.S. citizen. What do you have to do when you renew your driver's license? At least every place I've ever renewed a driver's license or get a driver's license, they ask you, are you a U.S. citizen? And what do you put? You put yes. If you are under the laws of God, you must have something against lying. If you have no proof of something, why would you state it? So ask yourself this, especially if you feel that you're in the community of God. Why have you been lying about this? So you're told that you're a U.S. citizen. Do you ever ask for proof? How do you know? All right. Go into a courtroom and tell them you're not a U.S. citizen and see what happens. They don't like that. They need you to be a citizen. So there's a whole lot of things that you can file if you get pulled into the system. However, I can't give you all those things. You're going to have to formulate a lot of those yourself. Okay. You got to learn how to write up a motion. You've got to learn how to format these things. You got to learn to motion. So like, one of the things I've recently learned, because I've tried putting stuff into a court case before, and unless that stuff is accompanied with a motion, they'll ignore it. They don't have to look at it because the court has to be moved. Even if you just do a motion for judicial notice for something that you put in, at least you get it on the record, and they have to see it. They have to hear it. They have to acknowledge it. Okay. The motion will make them acknowledge it. Okay. It does you no good to put paperwork into a court case if you don't accompany it with a motion or put it in there in support of a motion. It's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there. I know I filed 100 things into a case one time, probably 700 pages of stuff. Just pretended it didn't exist. All right, real quick, let's talk ANC stuff. Okay. Now, the ANC that I have been advocating people get is with the state of Minnesota. Why? Because Minnesota is the only state that makes it easy to do it right. So how does it work with Minnesota? You go online, you can get onto their website, you can file it, and they don't do anything that crosses wires. As long as you fill it out right, there's nothing there that says that you own that legal name. Well, I shouldn't say legal name. I shouldn't say all caps name, because even your private name is a legal name. The first, middle, last name, okay, from the government that's on your certificate of live birth, that's usually written in all caps, all right? It says that you're the holder for that business. That's what you want, because that doesn't impart ownership. When I filed my ANC stuff in Kentucky, it says that I adopted the name. Well, what does that mean that I adopted the name? I went and looked up in the Black's Law Dictionary what the word adopted means. It imparts ownership. Okay. So I wouldn't want to walk into a court case with that document, because I'm once again saying that I own the name, and that is where the wires are getting crossed. You walk into a courtroom and they call out John Gregory Dosen. And I stand up and say, that's me, Your Honor. I'm making myself surety for that name, and I'm not that name. Okay. That name is not a living, breathing man. Okay. But if you walk into court and you're representing McDonald's, okay, McDonald's, you can't walk in and say, I am McDonald's. Everybody knows that you're just the agent for McDonald's. Okay. We've got somebody on this call who walked into court recently and said, I'm just the agent for that entity. They don't like that. Okay. Because that separates you from that entity and they don't like that. There's a whole body of law written for people who are under the misunderstanding that they are the legal name, and it's called for individuals, all this individual law. Okay, what is an individual? An individual is a man or woman who thinks that they are the all caps first, middle, last name. And when you file in the state of Minnesota, it breaks that. It separates you from, and when I say you, I mean the you that is the given name and the family name or surname, from the first, middle, last name that's given to you by the government. All right. Now, the guy who first discovered all this, oh, one more thing before I cover that. I recently recognized, thanks to some other folks, something that we're all probably doing that actually keeps that wire crossed. Okay. Now, I have a certificate of live birth from Kentucky. I think I have it right here. So let me show you this. The certificate of live birth from Kentucky. I got this, I think, in 2010. So it's just a copy that was pulled out, right? It has, here's what it looks like. Okay. Got the border around it. Okay. This is the, it's a certified record of birth, Commonwealth of Kentucky Cabinet for Health Services. Okay. It says child's name, and then it's got all caps. Well, I just realized something. Even though I'm an adult now, it still says child. Ever think about that? Why does it still say child? Shouldn't it change to something other than child? Okay. So if I use this entity right here is a child. Look at that. Child's name. Well, there you go. Child's date of birth. Now, this date of birth that's on here is the date of birth that came about when I exited my mother's womb. It's February 12th, 1974. Okay. So what is that date? That is the date that I parted from my mother. Most births occur in a hospital nowadays. Who cuts the cord? The cord is cut by a government agent, a licensed medical professional who's licensed by the state. They're acting as an actor or an agent of the state, be it a doctor or a nurse, whatever they are in that hospital, unless the mother or some non-governmental entity cuts that cord's literally being cut by the government. See how that kind of gives them a claim and a standing in this stuff? Because we're going to the government and we're literally letting them cut the cord. And then they fill in all this stuff. Your mother fills this stuff in on the SS5 and she acts as an informant. If you look on your certificate of birth, usually there's the words informant. Okay. So there's another date on here. It's the date filed by registrar. The date filed by registrar on mine is March 27th, 1974. Okay. That is about a month and 2 weeks past the date of my actual birth. So what is the date filed by registrar? The date filed by registrar is actually the creation date for this all caps name right here at the top. Okay. So by me saying that this is my name and that is my date of birth, I'm confusing the wires and I'm going ahead and saying I am this entity. So if anybody asks you for your birth date and they're in the public, they're probably asking for the creation date of this thing right here. Okay. And that is not the date that I came out of my mother's womb and had a government agent cut the cord. That's the creation date. Okay. Keep that in mind. So when you go filing court cases and somebody says, you know, you're putting in your birth date, which date are they wanting? Are they wanting the creation date for the entity, or are they wanting the date that you came out of your mother's womb? It's two different things. One's in the private, one's in the public. Okay. So the guy that started the ANC stuff that really made it public was a fellow named Douglas Joseph Heeridge. And Douglas Joseph Heeridge went to all the state secretary of state. I'm sure he did this online. I'm sure he didn't do it in person. And he looked to see if he could easily register the name and not cross those wires, not be given the ownership of the name, right? So the problem that he ran into is every single state but Minnesota showed some sort of ownership in the name. and it kept the wires crossed. It didn't give him what he was looking for. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting the Minnesota assumed name certificate. I still recommend it. Okay. The problem you're going to run into is when you're entering into court cases, when you're trying to get a bank account, they're going to look at that and they're going to say, well, that's from Minnesota. We don't recognize that. Now, is that true? No. We had somebody who was pulled over recently. They showed their assumed name certificate from Minnesota, and the cop said, this is from Minnesota. He tried to hand it back. He said, we don't recognize that here. It doesn't do any good here. So the guy said, if I had a Minnesota driver's license, would that be good? And the cop said, well, of course. He said, then how can you not recognize one document, but you can recognize another? He said, if I came to Kentucky, if I moved to Kentucky, because this happened in Kentucky, and he said, I wanted to get a Kentucky driver's license, and I took into the DMV a Minnesota birth certificate of birth, would they tell me it's no good here? Do I have to be born in Kentucky to get a Kentucky driver's license? He said, no. He said, then how can I not have a business that's formed in one state that's not good here? You're saying you ignore this one. And the police didn't have an answer, of course. I mean, it is just as good here as it is everywhere else. Okay. But you want to try to make things as easy as possible on you. Okay. And you want to give yourself as much power as possible. And what I'm finding by digging into different states' assumed name laws is it is possible to set things up so you're not imparting ownership. However, it's a little harder because you have to really read into the laws and it's not evident. And I think I've discovered a way to do it, which doesn't require you to cross those wires. Okay. The other thing you're going to want is you do not want to be a single solitary name holder for that name, because if you get put in jail, if something happens and you're indisposed of, you're going to want trusted individuals who can act as the holder for that name. So recently what I did is I took my Kentucky assumed name certificate. I'm going to pull that out real quick and show you. I took my Kentucky assumed name certificate and I wanted to add some name holders to it. Now in Kentucky, there's two ways that you can register the name. You can go online or mail in to the Secretary of State for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the paperwork, and you can get an assumed name. Okay. For many different entities, general partnerships, S corps, corporations of all type, and so on and so forth, LLCs and all that stuff. However, if you're going to go to the county, you can only register one type of business, and that is a sole proprietorship. That's just the way they have it set up in Kentucky. So if you go into a county courthouse in Kentucky and you say, I want to register an assumed name, the only form they're going to give you is one that applies to a sole proprietorship. What is a sole proprietorship? A sole proprietorship is a business entity. It's an assumed name that has the same name as the owner of the business. So think about this. Let's say your name is John Jacob Astor, okay? And it's at the top of a page. And that's the assumed name, okay? Underneath that is John Jacob Astor, all caps, just like that. And that's what they call the real name of the entity. They can't tax both of those entities because it's literally the same entity. So they call the limited liability company, not limited liability company, they call the sole proprietorship a pass-through organization. In all your states and for their departments of revenue and for Internal Revenue Service purposes, a sole proprietor is a pass-through organization for tax purposes. If they didn't make it that way, then you would be paying taxes twice if you had a sole proprietorship. And I hope that makes sense to folks. Just write your name in all cap letters, first, middle, last, on the paper. Put it twice. Draw an arrow from the top one to the bottom one. The top one is the pass-through organization, the sole proprietorship. The bottom one is you, okay? So if they don't make one of those non-taxable, then they're going to be taxing you twice. So if you made 20 grand and you reported that as taxes for the limited or for the sole proprietorship, then you would literally be paying the tax in this one and the tax for this one. So they make the top one a pass-through organization for tax purposes. Now, in Kentucky, you can only register the sole proprietor at the county level. So I wanted to add name holders to my assumed name certificate. So I made up a form And the form was amendment to assumed name certificate. And I added those sole proprietors, or I added those additional name holders. And I took it into the county courthouse, and this took about an hour because it resulted in some, not really confrontation, but some kerfuffle. I mean, it was all amiable, but I mean, the clerk was sure flustered. She ended up calling it because she didn't have any way to enter that into the system. When she goes to enter this into the system, she doesn't have anything that references the document that I gave her, which is the amendment. She says, if it's a sole proprietorship, then it can't have multiple name holders. That makes sense. I didn't really realize I was wrong at the time. I was just trying this, right? Because when you read through the assumed name laws for Kentucky, there are only 4 pages. They could be condensed to 3. They're not that bad. However, even though it's simply worded, it's very difficult to understand, like all law is, right? There's multiple levels to it, just like scripture. So I left the stuff with them, left the fee with them. I actually need to go pick that up. And we ended on good terms. I need to. So the next day I called them and I realized what was going on. And I told them, I said, look, y'all don't have to send that back. I'll come in and get it. You don't have to forward it. You don't have to file it. I said, I was wrong. I apologize. Okay. I'm actually going to buy him a card because I kind of like to have these people on my side. Right. And we all did learn a lot. And the only reason that the clerk couldn't help me out was she didn't know what I should do. Well, a buddy of mine says there's 3 levers. Okay. All government entities have 3 levers. Okay. And if you go in with the 4th lever, they don't know how to pull it. Okay. So there's 3 things that all government agents know how to do in their office. They do 3 things. They do those 3 things all day long. If you go in and it's outside those 3 things, you're going to get met with the deer in headlights look. Okay. So what I did was we started looking at the Kentucky assumed name certificate laws. And I have a feeling that there's a possibility that this can be done in every state. I've not checked every state. I've only checked a couple states. Okay. And this is kind of difficult to decipher. But what we're going to do is I'm going to do screen sharing and I'm going to pop up my screen and I'm going to show you what I've discovered about how to arrange this in states other than Minnesota. And why would you want to do that? Because if you have stuff set up in the state that you're geographically in, it's going to have more power. You're going to have less trouble just getting them to accept it, right? I mean, ideally, we should be able to register our stuff in every state just like we do Minnesota, right? The reality is they've made it very difficult in every state. Okay, but I don't think it's impossible. So how do we do it? Well, the first thing I started looking at, this was done with a buddy who's smarter than me because I didn't figure this out. There is another entity that is a pass-through organization. It's called a general partnership. A general partnership for tax purposes is a pass-through organization. And I'm going to do screen sharing now so that you guys can see, and we're going to pull a couple things up and look at them. All right, so you guys should be seeing my screen right about now. And in order for me to click on tabs at the top of my browser, I'm going to have to move something. So give me just a moment to set it up. I got all kinds of stuff going here. All right. Let's see here. All right. Now, can people see my screen easily? Can anybody tell me if you can see my screen easily? I'm going to pull up an IRS website. Can you all see the IRS website?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Tax information for partnerships. Now, you have to understand that everything they tell us in regards to all this stuff is carefully veiled. Okay. It's going to be difficult to read. It's simple language, but I'm going to show you how they structure it to make people think one thing when it's actually another. Tax information for partnerships. And this is the IRS website, www.irs.gov. Okay. A partnership is the relationship between 2 or more people to do trade or business. Each person contributes money, property, labor, or skill, and shares in the profits and losses of the business. Okay. A partnership must file an annual information return. Now, notice they're not talking about one specific type of partnership. They're talking about all of them. Okay. A partnership must file an annual. Does that mean that a general partnership must file an annual information return? It does not. Okay, let's read on. It also says, but it does not pay income tax. Now that's true. None of your partnerships pay income tax because they're pass-through organizations. Now there are partnerships that are controlled by the state. A general partnership is not one of them. Okay. Partners are not employees and shouldn't be issued a Form W-2. So the partnership doesn't W-2 them. The partnership must furnish copies of Schedule K-1 to the partner. Okay. Now that's talking about all the partnerships, but it's not including the general partnership, but it doesn't say that. Okay. But look what this says. Forms for partnerships. The partnership as an entity may need to file the forms below. May. May is a big word. Insurance companies love to use it and governments love to use it. I like to use it too, just in a different way. May. It doesn't say it has to. It says may. And so they have the different forms here. Okay. Let me see if there's a general partnership. Okay, there's not a general partnership reference there. That's okay. Okay, we're going to move on. So we just read the little short IRS thing there. Now, this is just from a private website, but let's read this because it kind of backs up what we want to learn here. General partnership information return. That's right here. General or partnership information return. General partnerships do not pay income taxes. Okay. And then it goes on to say, the profits and losses of the partnership's business are passed through to the partners on an equal basis, regardless of the differing contributions in time and effort among the partners. So it doesn't matter how much one person works or one man works or one woman works, the tax liability passes through. Okay. A general partnership, however, is required to file an information return. I don't believe that's true. Okay. So I think we're being misled here. Keep in mind, this is not a U.S. government website. Okay. It says that a general partnership is required to file an information return. I cannot find in the government websites that tell me a general partnership has to file this. Okay. Specifically in the Kentucky Department of Revenue website, it says that the general partnership is encouraged to report on its members. It doesn't say it just like that, but it's basically what it's saying. Let me rephrase that for you. A general partnership is encouraged by the state to rat on its members. Okay, that's what that means. Okay, they're encouraged to. You don't have to. Okay, so what happens once the tax liability passes through the general partnership? It lands on the individual. Y'all understand that an individual is required to pay taxes, right? If you are an individual, what sort of tax return should you file? An individual tax return, right? Form, what is it, 1040? 1040? You used to call it a 1040 EZ. It's an individual thing. Individual partner returns. There you go. So an individual, like all individuals earning income, the partners and individual partners are required to file Form 1040 with the IRS. There it is. I didn't even read past the first section there before we got on this call. Because the partner's income is derived from the operation of the general partnership, Schedule E must accompany the partner's form. And that's all for individuals. Are you an individual? You need to figure out what an individual is. An individual is someone who thinks they are the first, middle, last name. Okay. So let's move on. And what they say is that, okay, so I'm going to go, this is for Kentucky. Okay. And I can't do every state, obviously. So we're just using Kentucky, the one that I've researched as an example. This is a Kentucky partnership income and LLE return. Okay. LLET return. Okay. It's form 765. Okay. And I'm going to scroll through this form. It's very long. The form isn't that long, but the instructions are killer. And I'm going to look for the words general partnership. Okay. Okay. A corporation that owns an interest in a partnership, and that's right here. A corporation that owns an interest in a partnership classified as a limited liability pass-through entity. Are general partnerships limited liability pass-through entities? No, I don't think so. I think a general partnership is a general partnership. I could be wrong, but I don't know why you would call a general partnership a limited liability pass-through entity. It could be. Or that owns an interest in a general partnership organized or formed as a general partnership. Now, that's interesting language. A general partnership organized as a general partnership. almost is like we're talking legalese here, isn't it? Must include the proportionate share of the sales, property, and payroll of the partnership classified as a limited liability past due entity or general partnership and computing its own apportionate factor. Let's move on just a little bit. We could dissect that, but it would take a while. It gets a little easier down below. Let me find it. Okay, instructions. This is on page 13 of this mess. Section A of this schedule must be, and why are we reading this? We're reading this because it's one example of how a state handles taxes for a general partnership. Section A of this schedule must be completed by the partnership, except the partnership exempt from LLET per KRS 141.0401 subsection 6. So what does that tell us? That tells us that there are partnerships that are exempt from the LLET. What is LLET? Let's look what an LLET is. LLET, limited liability entity tax. Okay. So listen to that again. Section A of the schedule must be completed by the partnership, except a partnership exempt from limited liability income tax. If the partnership, and this is where it gets tricky, if the partnership filing the tax return is a partner or member of a limited liability pass-through entity or general partnership. So if the partnership filing the tax return is a member of a general partnership, it doesn't say that the general partnership has to do this. It's saying if the partnership filing the tax return is a member of the partner's general partnership. Do you see the difference? You see how they're phrasing this to make you think that a general partnership has to do this. Doing business in Kentucky, complete Schedule L-C. I would tell you that a general partnership does not have to complete Schedule L-C because a general partnership is a general partnership. It's not a general partnership doing business as a general partnership. That sounds like word salad, probably because in good part it is. But you would have to sit here and dissect this very carefully and diagram it out in order to thoroughly understand it. Why doesn't it just say that a general partnership must file, if it's doing business in Kentucky, must file this? Why don't they say that? Because they're writing it in a way to hide the truth, okay? So, with that said, it's my position that a general partnership is a pass-through entity that has no obligation to inform on the partners, and it has no obligation to pay taxes because it's a pass-through organization. Now I was starting to see here how this could be used. Me and my buddy were starting to see how this could be used to set up an entity in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that would be recognized by the Commonwealth of Kentucky. All right, so no cop could ever say, "Oh no, this is not acceptable here." And you could still also use it to go to the Secretary of State and file an assumed name certificate, and I'll show you how. A general partnership is a private entity. You do not have to make any of your general partnership agreement public. You'll write up if you do it this way, you're going to write up a general partnership agreement. It's going to be between you and at least one other person. Okay. I don't know if this is true for all the states, but in Kentucky, you have to use, when you form a general partnership, you have to use the last name of each entity in the general partnership name. Okay, so let's bring up a document real quick. And let's say that the general partnership, I'm so sorry. Let me grab something. I can go all week and that dog won't say a word, but as soon as I start this meeting up, oh, okay, love him to death though. So for the general partnership, let's say that you've got 4 individuals who are going to be general partnership members, okay? And let's say their names are John Edward Dosen, Julie Jane Kozlowski, however, John Edward Smith, and Jessica Lane Berry. That means that the name of your general partnership must include the words Dosen, Kozlowski, Smith, and Berry. And just to make it even more specific, let's say there's 2 Dosons, okay? Or 2 Berries. We'll just do 2 Berries, okay? Linda Jane Berry, okay? So what would your general partnership be named? It would be named Doson Kozlowski Smith Berry and Berry. Now, where do we see that format of names often? Law firms, right? Law firms love to do this, you know, like the law firm of get them, stick them, and screw them, right? We've all seen it. They use those names, and they'll even repeat some of those names, like Smith, 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 and Johnson, right? So this would be the name, and I'm sure you could add more to it, but let's just keep it simple, okay? Doson, Kozlowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry. So that's going to be the general partnership right there. That's the name of the general partnership. How do you write up a general partnership agreement? Get online, research it. It's not that difficult. I'm going to read you the one that I have set up for some folks here. I'm not going to show the document because it has information on it that is not public, and I just don't want to reveal everything here. I'm very good about, I'm huge. I reveal crap on myself all the time, right? Ain't a person who listens to these videos can't find me. Hell, half of them probably have my telephone number, but I'm not going to reveal other. I'm very careful about revealing other people's information. And if I ever inadvertently do that, it's a huge mistake. All right. So general partnership agreement is at the top of the page. It says for, and then it's got the name of the partnership, you know, Doson, Kozlowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry. Name through which the business will be conducted, not accounting and assumed name is what is written underneath that. And you don't need this as a template. You can write up your own. This isn't that difficult. I'm just going through it so you have an ideal, okay? I'm also including in this a whole lot of language that I would use, okay, because of my beliefs in life, okay? So this Doson, Kozlowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry is used by a woman, W-O/man, woman or man, right, woman with living soul in accordance with Genesis 2:7 of the King James Bible, King James Version, whose real names hereafter referred to as owner or owners and in care of address with the associated business partnership percentage. Because a lot of states have rules for the general partnership, even if they're like guidelines, you might say. And one of the things, and there's elements of a general partnership that you're going to want to have in your general partnership. For each member of the general partnership, you're going to want to have the percentage of ownership for each partner. So if you've got 2 partners, it could be a 50-50 ownership. It could be a 90-10. It could be a 99-1, right? It could be a 45-55. That's up to the partners. This is private, okay? The only time you'll ever use this document is if you're going in to like say a bank and getting a bank account for Doson, Kozlowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry. Okay. So I've got the partners listed here, and it's got their name, but it's got the name written as the so for Linda Lane Berry, it would be Linda J. Berry. Okay. I have a suspicion that when you take the first, middle, last name and you put a period in it, that you are putting it into the international law jurisdiction. I can't explain that. I could give you resources to listen to, but what does a period do? A period is a full stop. Have you ever noticed that how all these attorneys and judges, with very, very few exceptions, write their name as first name, middle initial, dot, last name? There's a reason behind that. That's a rabbit trail for you to go down, okay? But I think when you say Linda Jane Berry, it's a different entity than Linda J. Berry, okay? They're giving themselves some protection with that, or at least they think they are. And they're also doing a little nod and a wink. And if you asked half the attorneys out there that if they know why they do that, they may not even know. They're part of the system. They're just part of the whole thing, right? They're one of the what are they called? Not in the memes, the NPCs, non-player characters, the ones that just act and really don't know why they're doing it in a video game, right? And then it says any percentage of ownership not explicitly accounted for is to be equally divided amongst the owners. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 owners here. And those owners each get 14.285%, because if you take 100 and divide by 5, you get 14.285. And there may be some little bitty per thousandth of percentage left over after that, and it's equally divided amongst the partners. It says rights, privileges, and responsibilities of owners are expressly isolated to those that only exist between living souls created by God and nothing more and nothing less. That's the language I would use. You're probably not going to find this anywhere else in the world. Surety. Partners do not intend to offer their body or their energy as surety for the general partnership. That's important, right? Name or any assumed names, for that does violate God's scripture as recorded in Proverbs 6, 1 through 5, Proverbs 11, 15, and Proverbs 17, 18. The title of owner is accepted without recourse. And I hate to use the word Christian, as a man of faith, I have noticed that when I use scripture, when I'm talking to public entities, or I put it into the paperwork, it changes things. It really does. I'm not using it as a advantage. I'm simply putting in the supporting information that supports what I just said. Okay. Then I've got the autographs of the owners. Go to Black's Law Dictionary. Look up the difference between an autograph and a signature. You're going to find they're quite different. One has a very long definition, and the other one has like a one sentence definition. Okay. So when somebody says you need to sign something and you autograph it, that's different. Okay. And we got the autographs of the owners. We got the date. Okay. Everything I sign now, here's the way I sign it at the very beginning. All rights reserved, comma, without recourse, colon, and then I put my name as William E. Farrell. That's how I do it. Okay, there's 1,000 other ways to do it. That's how I've been doing it. I've got a buddy who just flipped over. He's signing things without recourse in cursive and putting an X. When you sign any document, you're entering into contract or you're modifying an existing contract, period. If you remember back in the days of the old West, supposedly, allegedly, the Indians would often reach over and just touch the ink pen to signify their consent to the contract, and then the Army general or officer would pick it up and sign for them. Is that illegal? Yes, it is. You do not have to physically pick the pen up in order to sign anything. So I'm going to flip back over to full screen for just a moment and share just a quick story. So I went into the courthouse a little while back and I filed a lien against the property that I'm physically on. At the time, I believed that might help protect me in case something happened. I filed a lien against my property. It was a lien that I could verify through records, that I had claimed to file. I think I filed a $500,000 lien against a property that books for about $65,000, $120,000, something like that. And the woman that was at the desk was very, very adamant that I already owned the property and that I should not be filing a lien against it, because who could I possibly be hoping to get any money from? The thing is, we all know that the private man is a separate entity from the public one, right? I am not that first, middle, last name. That's just a business entity. And if I want to file a lien against its assets, so much more power to me, right? So we went backwards and forth a little bit. I already had the lien paperwork made up, and she said, okay. She said, she finally got tired of dealing with it. She said, you've got to sign it. Okay. Now I had already signed it. I had signed it with my private name. I'm just going to call it the private name, which was Farrell Cohen William Ernest. DBA, doing business as William Ernest Farrell, the all caps first, middle, last name. And I said, I think you might be slightly mistaken. I said, it's already signed. And she said, in order for it to be signed, you have to write your name in cursive. Ooh, now we got an interesting thing, right? Got to write my name in cursive. And I stood there for just a second and I thought about, okay, how am I going to respond to this? Because I'm not going to argue with her. I don't want to argue. I don't want to fight. Argument doesn't get you anywhere. You never want to argue. Avoid argument at all costs. There's 4 ways to respond to a contract. Argument, silence, dishonorable. Both of them are the argument, silence, dishonorable. Unconditional acceptance, which is honorable, but generally not in your best interest. Like, hey, you owe me $100 and you pull $100 out of your pocket and give it to me. It's unconditional acceptance. Or conditional acceptance. So I thought of those 4 things and I thought, wait a second. Somebody told me the other day that they're no longer teaching cursive writing at the local high school. which I think is sad, right? For whatever reason, they're just not doing it. One of the reasons I think is that cursive writing is for free people and printing out of computers for slaves. So maybe that's the reason, right? Some people say, well, the Declaration of Independence and the founding documents are all written in cursive. People who can't read cursive can't read them. Maybe that it could be more than one reason, but they've stopped teaching cursive writing. And if you have a child, I encourage you to teach them Spencerian penmanship. It's beautiful, and it's you should know how to write in cursive. So I said, they're not even teaching cursive at the local high school. So you say that they have to sign in cursive. I said, so when these people come in who aren't being taught cursive, how do they sign it? And she said, they just do the best they can. And she said it just like that. I was like, oh, hell, they do the best they can. I said, okay, well, I'm going to do the best I can. And I said, can I see your pen? And I reached over and I got her pen, and I took the paper and I went dot, and I put a dot right there beside my already existing autograph, right? And she said, what's that? And I said, well, that's the best I can. She grabbed the paper, jerked it back. She said, I'll file it tomorrow. I was like, as long as you file it, I don't care. So basically, I just outlasted her and made her so frustrated that she didn't want to deal with me anymore, right? I did go back later to see if they had filed that in there, and it is in the records. I was kind of afraid that, but here's what I think they did. I think they filed it somewhere else besides where they said. I've got a book and page number, but if I go looking for the book and page number, it's not there. So that's another issue I'm going to bring up with them at a later date, because I've already frustrated these poor folks enough for right now. So, when you sign documents, you may want to look into what it means when you sign with a limited endorsement. Okay. The words without recourse are covered in the UCC. Go look it up. Okay. There's also a book out there that folks, I don't have it handy right at the moment. There's a book that covers it. I can put it up in the group later. I think I already have what the words limited or not, what the words without recourse mean. Okay. I've got a buddy that's signing everything like that. He does not sign anything anymore without the words without recourse. And it's resulted in some interesting things. He recently tried to get a secured loan at a bank, and he signed without recourse. And they're nervous, let me put it that way. Okay. Because when you sign without recourse, it's very powerful. The other one is all rights reserved. I don't personally like putting UCC codes into my signature. So a lot of people put UCC 1-308. Well, that's fine if you look up what UCC 1-308 is, but what if in 2 years they change UCC 1-308? Now you've got a signature out there with that code on it, and yeah, it's at a different date, but I don't know. I don't like referencing UCC code in my signature. I'd rather just sign it without prejudice, or not without. That's another one that you can put. I just like putting, all rights reserved without recourse, and then Farrell William Ernest doing business as this entity, because that's really what we're doing. We're doing business as the first, middle, last name. Okay. So we got this general partnership. Okay. The general partnership is made up. I've got mine on one piece of paper. Okay. I'm sure that you could write up a general partnership that's 10,000 pages long. Okay. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep it simple. So it's one page. Okay. Because the purpose for this is not so much to start a widget business as it is to give the members protection for each other. That's what I'm doing. So I've got the general partnership. Where does the assumed name fit in? Okay. And here's where the assumed name fits in. We're going to go back to screen sharing. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen. And if anybody can't, you don't have to affirm that you can see my screen when I pull it up. Just if you can't, somebody let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume you can. Okay. So I'm going to go to the Kentucky Secretary of State. Okay. And here we have the Commonwealth of Kentucky Certificate of Assumed Name. And this is the one that you will fill out if you go to the Secretary of State within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, see that form right there? Real quick, I'm going to hit stop sharing. Okay. If you file at the county level, this is what it looks like. Are you ready for the difference? Just to show you what it's like in this state. This is what it looks like. Forgive the blue running ink because I left the dang thing out in the rain. But you'll notice that it has a book and a page number right here. Okay. So this is the form the county uses. And back to the screen sharing. This is the form that the Secretary of State uses. Isn't that different? Okay. Now, there's a few errors in here. First off, they put the name of the Secretary of State in here. This is totally irrelevant to the conversation, by the way. I'm just pointing it out because it fascinates me, okay? If you don't find this stuff fascinating, you won't dig in and learn about it. Allison Lundergan Grimes is no longer the Secretary of State in Kentucky. This should say Commonwealth of Kentucky and then have Secretary of State. It shouldn't have a name in it because you don't care whose name is there. All you're doing is business with the position. That's it. Not physician, position. You're just doing business with that position. It's just like the CEO of McDonald's. You don't care who the CEO of McDonald's is if you have a claim against McDonald's. All you care about is the whoever is sitting in that position fills that position. Okay. Remember, they're all actors. In a lot of cases, they're really actors, like the current president of Ukraine. Look him up. He's a freaking comedian. Well, the most conservative, beloved politician ever that was an actor was Ronald Reagan, literally an actor. These people are actors on the world stage. Okay, so here's how we would fill this out, okay, in Kentucky, and it may be very, very, very similar in your state, okay? If we were wanting to do business as a general partnership, now what we can do is we can file multiple assumed names for this general partnership. So remember, our general partnership has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 owners. You can have an unlimited number of owners and an unlimited number of members. Okay. I would guess if you went over 100 owners, they would all own less than 1% share of the business, but you could do it. Okay. There's no limit on this. So the particular general partnership that we've set up, many of the members are under 18. So we're just giving the ones who are old enough to be able to act in the public ownership in the business. You can be 14 and have enough knowledge to act as an owner in a business, but we'll get into that in another call. So we have more members than we do owners. Okay. So you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 owners of the business, but you can have 30 members. Okay. And all of them can do an assumed name certificate. Okay. It's making sense. All right. So how would we fill this out? So let's take the last one here, Linda Jane Berry. Linda Jane Berry is going to do her assumed name certificate in Kentucky for Dosen, Kozowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry. Okay. So I got to write this down because I'm not flipping the screens backwards and forth. And I'm going to, for Kozowski, I'm just typing K-A-Z-Z-S. Okay. I'm not going to try to type all that out. I should have picked an easier name, but we'll go with it. Smith, Berry, and Berry. Okay. All right. So how would we fill this out if we were Linda Jane Berry? Here's how we would fill it out. Okay. The assumed name is Linda Jane Berry. All right. Linda Jane Berry. The assumed name is Linda Jane Berry. The name of the business entity, and we can assume that Linda Jane Berry has already registered her name in Minnesota. That's just that much more oomph to add to. It's more tools for the toolbox. Okay. The name of the business entity, and in the case of the general partnership, the partners, that are adopting the assumed name. Now, there's that word adopting there, but we're just going to ignore that for right now. I am tempted to redo this form because this form does not have a government OMB number on it. It's not an official government form, folks. It has to have a government OMB number on it to be an official government form. Now, you got to be careful about modifying government forms, but if it's not a government form, how can there be a law against modifying it? So if one was to do this form themselves and change adopting to something else that is a little bit more friendly to what we're trying to do, which is not impart ownership, might not be a bad idea. Okay. I'm not real sure if it matters or not. I don't know, but maybe it does. The name of the business entity that is adopting the assumed name. Okay. This is where we're going to put Dosen, Kaczynski. Well, that sounds like some other name I probably shouldn't have used, doesn't it? Smith, and I'm only abbreviating it because I don't want to spell it out. Berry and Berry. Berry, and Dosen, Kaczynski, Smith, Berry and Berry. All right, just like that. Okay. Now, notice there that we have a list of real names. If you want to really research a state that is interesting to research for real names, go to the Idaho assumed name certificates or assumed name laws. The Idaho ones are very interesting. Real name. We're not going to get into what a real name is. The way they write it is just like they wrote the tax code that we read a while ago. It's very interesting how they write what the definition of a real name is. Okay. Another call. We just click X, a domestic general partnership. Okay. This application will be effective upon filing unless a delayed effective date. Okay. We don't care about a delayed effective date. This is effective upon filing. We're going to leave that blank. The business is organized and existing in the state or country of. Now, a lot of people might type Kentucky, but I need you to remember Kentucky's different. It's Commonwealth of Kentucky. And I would, if I were in a state that wasn't a Commonwealth like Arizona, I wouldn't type Arizona here. I would not type Arizona. Arizona doesn't exist in the public. It doesn't exist. Arizona is the state in the republic. Okay. Another thing that doesn't exist in the public is the state of Kentucky. That is not the entity. Okay. That doesn't exist in the public, period. Okay. There's no state of Kentucky. It's the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So we're going to put Commonwealth of Kentucky here. And if you haven't seen my post in the group, our Facebook group, about how I found a hole in a contract where they're saying that the governing authority is the state of Kentucky, go check it out. Because if they put the governing authority as the state of Kentucky and there is no state of Kentucky, the agreed upon governing authority doesn't exist. They may have well put that the governing authority was Mars. It doesn't exist. So if they tried to sue for this loan, how are they going to do it? It doesn't exist. You can always find holes in contracts, folks. All right. The business is organized and existing in the state or country of Commonwealth of Kentucky. The mailing address. Now here I'm going to put a private mailing address. How do I do that? I'm going to go care of. Care of. Why? Because men and women don't have mailing addresses. You don't have a mailing address on your thing. Okay. And we're going to put the mailing address. Let's say, and we're going to put the mailing address, not for the general partnership, but for Linda Jane Berry, the public entity. It's care of 145 South Main Street, okay, in Richmond, Kentucky. We're going to spell out Kentucky, and we're going to put for the zip code in the brackets. If you don't know what the brackets mean, message or email me, I'll explain it. 40375 or whatever. Okay. I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of Kentucky. That's interesting because there are no laws of Kentucky. There's laws of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So really and truly, they've once again made a mistake in their form, which isn't surprising after how much I've seen that apparently nobody can get their crap right. So the printed name, I'm going to put Linda J. Berry. Who's the title? She's the owner. And I'm going to put the date, November 31st, 2032, whatever. And for signature, what do you think I would write as the signature? Well, right up at the top, I'd put without recourse, all rights reserved. And then under that, I would put Linda J. Berry. That's the signature I would use for this. Your mileage may vary. So what have we set up? What have we set up here? Okay. So we've got Dosen, Kaczynski, Smith, Berry, and Berry. And we've got an assumed name of Linda J. Berry, so Dosen, Kaczynski, Smith, Berry, and Berry is doing business as Linda J. Berry. Okay, let's put that on let's just get this straight here. So we've got Dosen, Kaczynski, Smith, Berry, and Berry doing business as Linda Jane Berry. Think about that for just a second. What have we accomplished? Anyone who's in this general partnership, who's an owner, can now step into court for the business Linda Jane Berry. That's what we wanted to do when we filed the Minnesota certificate, right? Assumed name certificate, right? So for this general partnership, does Dosen, Kozlowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry have any tax liability? Oh. No. Their own codes say that these things have no tax liability. Check for your own satisfaction. It is my personal belief at this moment in time, at my current level, that Dosen, Kozlowski, Smith, Berry, and Berry have no reporting requirements. They're encouraged to report. Check your state, check the IRS laws for yourself. But we have an entity, a general partnership, that has no tax liability, has no reporting requirements. Okay. Now, who else do we have? We have Linda Jane Berry. This general partnership is doing business as Linda Jane Berry. Now, does Linda Jane Berry have any tax liability? You're going to have to answer that question for yourself. I personally think Linda Jane Berry does not have any tax liability. How can she? She's not an individual, especially if she's filed in Minnesota. How can an individual would be a woman who thinks she is Linda Jane Berry. But Linda Jane Berry, if you filed in Minnesota, is Linda Jane of the Berry family, right? Because the Berry is her inherited surname. The Linda Jane is her true given name. Okay, look on a U.S. passport. Anybody out there who's watching this video, if you say, well, the first, middle, last name is the same as a given name and a surname. No, it's not. Look at a passport. A passport falls under international law. A passport is not ID. It's not legal ID. What are the three things that a passport is missing to be legal ID? It's missing, first off, it's missing a legal name. Okay. If you look at a passport has your name written. Okay. It'll say Linda Jane like this. There's no hyphen, but they say Linda Jane. And underneath that, there's the word given name. And then it'll say Berry, right? And actually it's written in all caps. Okay. Who cares? I don't think the caps has anything to do with it anymore. I really don't. I know that's been a thing for years, but I don't think it matters. I think it's first, middle, last name as it's listed. It doesn't matter if they listed it in uppercase or lowercase. I can tell you that government entities will always uppercase it. And I've been advised that it comes from Roman law, where in Roman law, the way they did the name indicated your status, and slaves had their names in all caps. True or not, I don't know. Sounds cool. So Berry, and underneath that, they'll put surname. Okay. So a passport does not have a legal name on it. What else is a passport missing? Well, in the U.S. anyway, a passport is missing the nationality. What do they list as a passport nationality? Okay. They list USA. Is USA a nationality? No. USA is abbreviation for United States of America, and that is a corporation. We know it's a corporation. It has a credit score. It's a corporation. Supreme Court says it's a corporation. I could probably find 100 places where we're told in their own language that it's a corporation. What would nationality be for folks that are standing on the land in this so-called United States? It would be American. Okay. If you're in Japan, it would be Japanese. It would be in England, it would be English, or so for Canada, it would be Canadian, right? Canadian would be your nationality if you're in Canada. Okay. But you gotta understand that's different than United States of America. America is different than the United States of America. So who is American? Well, everybody in really the American continent is an American, right? What's the third thing that's missing in order for a passport to be a legal ID? Domicile. There's no domicile. There's no address. Okay. So there's entities that will use the passport as a legal ID, but it's not really a legal ID, which is why I think it would be a really good idea to have a passport. Back in the day, I used a passport for everything. I wouldn't use a driver's license, because a driver's license, I just inherently knew that somehow the passport was better. And the thing that I went off of is when I showed my passport, there was no address on there. And it wasn't until recently that I understood why a passport is such a cool thing. Okay. So in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, this is how you can set up a a entity, a business entity to give you the same protection, the same advantages, the same tools in the toolbox as filing in Minnesota. Okay. Now, does that mean you shouldn't file in Minnesota? I think it's still a good idea. I mean, it's just more stuff, right? And it costs $83 to file in Minnesota to get all 3 certificates. Okay. Because when you file in Minnesota, you're going to get 3 certificates if you do all 3. Okay. You don't have to. But the one thing, it costs $55 or $50 to get the certificate of assumed name, which looks like this, right? That's actually got the delineation between the 2 names, the surname, given name, and the legal name, or the first, middle, last name, right? And then you can also do the Office of Minnesota Secretary of State Certification of Record and the Office of Minnesota Secretary of State Certificate of Existence and Registration. One of those 2 is a Certificate of Good Standing. We know it's a Certificate of Good Standing because when you go to click on creating it in their website, it says Certificate of Good Standing. It just didn't come out the printer that way. What is good standing? You need to go reference. If you don't know what good standing means in corporate law, go look up good standing, what good standing means. If you look up the Idaho codes, good standing means that you have standing in court. That's the last thing I'm going to cover real quick before we move on to any kind of questions, because it's 9:23 and I've been going on for a while. So I've bored people to death by now, I'm sure. So, and I talk a lot, so that's okay though. Real quick, share screen, going to bring up the Idaho code because they're a really good example of what good standing means. I love this. Okay. Told you the Idaho assumed name certificate stuff was, the assumed name laws were interesting. So back to screen sharing momentarily. This will only take a minute. All right. So we're going to type in, and anytime you're looking for a state's assumed name laws, because a lot of them call them trade name laws. Okay. Trade names or whatever. We're going to type in Idaho assumed name law. Okay. See what comes up. Idaho statutes. Oh, there it is. Section. And anytime you're looking up assumed name laws, sometimes you'll be directed to the Secretary of State website. If you want to know what the laws are, you have to actually go to the executive branch laws, like the actual legislature where they put all the codes and the numbers in. Okay. So as you see at the top right here, we've got Home, Idaho Laws and Rules, Idaho Statutes, Title 30, Chapter 21, Section 30-21-805. That's how they organize their stuff. Every state is different. And that is why if you go to a different state and research their stuff, you're going to have to muddle through how they do their stuff. So let's get back out of this. This is Title 30, Chapter 21, Part 8. Let's go back to Chapter 21. You'll see it's hyperlinked right there. We're just going to click on that, and it's going to show us all of it. Okay. Title 30, corporations. We're all corporations, right? Chapter 21, Idaho Uniform Business Organizations Code. And it says preliminary provisions, filing, name of entity, registered agent of entity, foreign entities, administrative dissolution, miscellaneous provisions, assumed business names, Part 8. Let's click on Part 8 and see what happens here. See if I'm going the right way. It's been a minute since I've looked this up. Okay, so here's all of our assumed stuff. Part 8, assumed business names, okay? We've got all the stuff here. So 30-21-801 is the short title. 802 is the purpose. If you're in Idaho, I strongly suggest you read through all this and then put it away and go back and read through it again later. Do the same thing with your state. Put it away, go back and read through it again later. It's going to take a minute to digest this stuff because the language is tricky. Written well, written thoroughly, written simply, but very tricky. So we're going to go down to consequences of non-compliance. Let's look at that real quick. This is interesting. All right. Title 30, Corporations. Chapter 21, Idaho Uniform Business Organizations Code. Part 8, Assumed Business Names. What does this say? I'm going to move my screen a little bit so that I don't know what just popped up. Hold on just a second. Things just went to crap on my end. It may look fine on your end, but it does not look fine on my end. Hold on just a second. See if I can get this right. Okay, here we go. That's not what I want. I don't know if you guys can see the whole screen. I can't, so I've got to move some things. Here we go. Okay, let's read this. 30-21-810, consequence of noncompliance. Any person, that's an important word, who transacts business in Idaho under an assumed business name. Now, people may say, well, Bill, my name is Linda Jane Berry, and I'm not using an assumed business name. Well, Linda Jane Berry, you are, because the name you started out with was Linda Jane of the Berry family, which is a surname and a given name. And the name you're doing business with is going to be the first, middle, last name that your mama converted on your SS5 application for a social security number. So you are doing business under an assumed name. And if you don't register your name, you're going to be an individual. And all the laws and statutes, codes, and executive orders, ordinances, all of those things are going to apply to you because you're an individual. But once you register the name, you're no longer an individual if you know who you are and who you aren't. Any person who transacts business in Idaho under an assumed business name without having complied with the requirements of this chapter shall not be entitled to maintain any legal action in the courts of this state until the person has filed a certificate of assumed business name as required by this chapter. There you go. Hard proof that if you are acting as an individual who has not registered the assumed business name that you're interacting in public commerce with, you have no standing in court. And people wonder why 90 to 98% of everyone who goes into a court is found guilty and has to pay. Why? Because you have no standing in court. Now, are they going to tell you that you have to register your name because you have no standing? No, they're going to apply an entire subsection of law to you called individual law for individuals, and they're going to ream you. Okay? Now, does registering the name protect you? Gives you another tool in the toolbox. If you don't know what you're doing with it, it ain't going to do you no good. If there's an invading army and I give you an M16A2, but you don't know how to use it, it won't matter. Okay? So we got to learn how to use this stuff. But understanding that you should be registering your name before you start using it in commerce is huge. Okay? And it's going to change the game for you. You can no longer sign as an individual. Why? Because you're not an individual. So when they say, hey, who can get a name notarized? Who can do it? Who can do a notary? Only individuals can be notarized because they have to sign their name with unlimited endorsement, which is just an open signature. And when you do an open signature, unlimited endorsement, you're agreeing to everything in the contract, including cascading contracts that aren't expressly implied. So be very careful about doing an unlimited signature, okay? You should probably do limited endorsements on everything. And if somebody tells you you can't sign it that way, the very simple question is why? You know, if you're saying I can't sign all rights reserved, what rights am I waiving by signing this? Tell me specifically, right? I mean, if I can't reserve my rights, obviously I'm waiving some rights. Which rights do you think I'm waiving by giving an open signature? So, with that said, we're now at 9:30. This has gone on for an hour and a half. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them.
I got a question. Or two.
Fire away.
I did come into this late, about an hour late. I didn't know what time it was going to be starting, but anyway.
That's okay.
With the, okay, first question.
I'm not hearing you. If you're speaking, I can't hear you. I don't think I turned off my sound. Can anybody else hear Mark? I think it's Mark. Oh, there you are. Now I can hear
got
you.
me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay. So there's multiple people that have the same names, correct?
Correct.
So if John Edward Smith registers in Minnesota, and then another John Edward Smith comes to register in Minnesota, and won't it show up that his name is already being used and he cannot?
Nope, it doesn't. It doesn't stop anything. I just enacted screen sharing again. Let's run over to the Minnesota Secretary of State website. And let's look at that real quick. One of the thoughts that I had when I first started doing this was, oh gosh, I better go register my name before somebody else gets it. Doesn't matter. Okay. So start a business. Let's see if it's got anything in here. Are you looking? And I don't know where this is at. I know I've read it, but it's been a while, like a year since I read this. How to register, help with it. Okay. How to register your business. Let's see if it's here. I'm just going to try to find it while we're here because it's been a long time since I've seen this. There is language in here somewhere, and I remember seeing it. And I think I even see it when I do the register name filing, because I've done like 20, not for me, just for helping other people, right? I sat here with someone one day, and it was her and her husband, and they have 2 kids. That was 1, 2, 3, 4 complete filings that we did in just a couple hours. Okay. How to check business name availability. Okay. An online account is required in order to check name availability. Now that's something else I want to say. When you create an online account and you do something, it goes away. So when you go to register the account, you don't have to worry about the username and password. Just create a new one. You can even use the same email address. It doesn't matter. It just goes away. Go to the online business. Hold on a sec. To verify if the name you would like for your business is available, type of pros name. Okay, so just for a second. Okay, my name is William Ernest Farrell II. Let's see real quick if we can file William Ernest Farrell II. Let's just assume there's another William Ernest Farrell II. So business filings online. We're going to type in my name. Right there. Search. All right. And William Ernest Farrell II. It says, okay, let's go to, I may have to sign in and create an account. If so, that is not going to be possible right now on the call. Business filings online. His name, file a new. Okay, we're going to file an assumed name. It may tell us that we have to, yeah, we've got to log in. Account required, sign in or create an online account. Let me try signing in real quick. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and let me see if I can sign in using the one I created the other day. It may not let me. I'll go ahead and do this. Otherwise, I'll get, oh, it let me. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing real quick. All right. So search, file, new business, amendment, annual renewal statement, business name or file number. Search, business file number, file, new business. Okay, we're going to file a new business. We're going to file a new business. William Ernest Farrell. Okay, let's type that. Okay, hit search. All right, William Ernest Farrell II. Let's do the whole thing. Search. Okay, it's going to bring up the same thing. Okay. You should be able, because my understanding of it is that just because you do an assumed name filing doesn't protect the name. If you're going to keep anyone else from using that name in the state of Minnesota, you're going to have to file like what's called trademark, copyright, something like that, right? Maybe it won't let you.
So like in Utah, when you're setting up a DBA and the name is already taken, then you cannot use that DBA.
Good question, by the way.
I just thought that it might get to the point where the people with very common names are going to start running into a problem and a roadblock, because if Minnesota is the only door that's open for this process.
Okay, so here's the thing. The name that I filed in Minnesota is William Ernest Farrell II. I'm typing in William Ernest Farrell II right here, as you can see. And I'm hitting search over and over and over. And it says William Ernest Farrell II is available. Now, I know danged well that I have a Minnesota Secretary of State, William Ernest Farrell II DBA. It says up here, download name availability guidelines. So if we want to file assumed name, I think we can. Yep, it's going to let me.
Okay.
I don't
that's a
think
good
they can.
sign.
I don't think they can stop you. Think about it. If the law says that you have to register your name as an assumed name, then there's nothing that they can't put laws in there that say that you can only have one. And then everybody named Tom that's named Linda Jane Berry is going to be limited. Like the second Linda Jane Berry is not going to be able to file her name. It says
Yes.
download name availability guidelines. I've never clicked on this. Let's see. It says to be accepted for filing, business names must be different by at least one letter or numeral from other names already on file. I would have to go look that up in actual code before I would take that as truth, because this is the Office of Minnesota Secretary of State, and the Office of the Minnesota Secretary of State does not set the, it doesn't set the laws, right? Oh, if filing an assumed business name, this office does not check against other assumed names on record, as the law allows for the same or similar assumed name to be filed. Now that right there is what the common country boy would call confusing.
Well,
However,
that answers the question then.
I
on that
think
one.
it answers that question. I think that they can say that they won't accept it, but then they do accept it. Obviously, they're going to accept it because I just started to file it and it was letting me do it.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I don't see how they can stop that. I don't think that's a big concern or a worry, because if there are two William Ernest Farrells II, you can click on both and see which one you want, right?
That'd be true. Okay, second question.
Yep.
You say once we set up a bank account, business bank account,
Okay.
you close all other personal accounts.
Well, I say that that may be something you should consider doing, because personal bank accounts have tax liability and they're also easier to break into. Just like if you try to break into a business, it's going to be harder. Try to get a search warrant for a business, it's going to be harder. There's more requirements. However, if you try to break into a residence, it's almost laughably easy. We build residences. And what's a residence? A residence, according to Roman law, was the domicile or the home of a government agent. That's what resident means. It means you are a government employee. Those things are easy to do. They're easy. It's easy to get into a residence. It's easy to get a search warrant for a residence. It's harder. Like they can't just magically remove funds from a business bank account like they'll do an individual. I mean, crap, they can go into an individual's bank account and take stuff out. I had somebody a little while back who lost thousands of dollars because the revenue cabinet in their state just wiped their bank account out and said they owed it. Well, they didn't, but it took them like 2 months to get it straightened out. So I think business bank accounts, it's more truthful. I mean, if you're not an individual, why have you got an individual bank account, right?
Okay, now
I mean,
what about
Bank
personal?
account actually is more proof that you're not an individual if it's a business bank account.
Agreed. What about personal credit accounts, like personal credit card accounts, things like that? You want to close
Okay.
those too? And just
So
run
my-
up credit?
Here's where my brain's been going lately. Okay, so if you go to Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion, you're checking personal credit reports, right?
Yes.
So I thought, okay, maybe I shouldn't even have a personal credit report. Maybe those should be killed off. Maybe I should just make them close those completely. Like, let them know I don't want them. And I tried to open a new business account. So who's responsible for businesses? Well, overwhelmingly it's Dun & Bradstreet, right? So I applied for a new Dun & Bradstreet business account thing where they actually start reporting, so to build business credit. They denied me. They said that I didn't give them enough evidence to prove who I am. So I didn't pursue it because it didn't have time at the moment. So I was talking to someone the other day and they said Dun & Bradstreet, they're no longer using that in court cases. Dun & Bradstreet, all that stuff has been closed out. You can go. So if you get a Dun & Bradstreet account, which costs hundreds of dollars a year, Dun & Bradstreet used to be what you would buy an account to if you were an investor, because you can pull up a Dun & Bradstreet report on, say, IBM or McDonald's, and it lists tons of information, right? However, I was informed that because of a change in federal law, and I've not verified this, that they're no longer doing this. Like it was closed out by Trump, apparently. I've not researched this. This is just my suspicions where I would go if I was going to go down this rabbit hole. And that they're now using something different. And I'll have to go down that rabbit hole to tell you more. But maybe that's why Dun & Bradstreet turned me down, because I gave them the necessary information. I attached the files for my Office of the Minnesota Secretary of State stuff. And I attached files showing I had a business bank account. And I attached some other files, but they turned me down. And I was told that the reason that happened is because Dun & Bradstreet is kind of going away and they're doing things differently now. It has something to do with QSIP numbers, I think. I don't know. I haven't really figured it out. However, right now, I'm going to continue using Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion and trying to keep those reports, those numbers up so that I can use credit, because that's what they do. But I think ideally, should we be using those? Probably not, but that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, I have heard that Dun & Bradstreet is going away and that they're using either a different entity or a different name now.
Oh, you heard that too.
I'm not sure.
What's the other entity? And it's not coming to mind right now. I was talking in depth about this to someone the other day. If you're going to go check business credit, what is the name of that particular report? It's not Equifax or TransUnion.
Not LexisNexis, is it?
LexisNexis. There you go. Okay. So here's what I've heard about LexisNexis. So a buddy of mine pulled his LexisNexis. The LexisNexis actually is your, like when let's say that the FBI were doing an investigation on you, they pull the LexisNexis. The LexisNexis is more than a credit report. It's like your entire dossier. It's got your employment history. It's got your residential history. It's got your personal information. It's got your business information. It's got your traffic tickets. It's got your criminal indictments. It's got your convictions on it. I think there's a lot of gravy with the LexisNexis thing. I haven't dug into it yet, but I think that's the direction to go next is LexisNexis. I'm going to check into this stuff. And the fact that you say you've heard that the whole Dun & Bradstreet thing's going away, that lends credence to what someone else told me. So we got some clues to work off of now.
Okay, I got one more question, and I'm sorry for taking so much time. If anybody else
No,
wants-
dude, you're cool. You're cool. This is great.
But okay, so we start at Minnesota. After Minnesota, do we need to register and assume name in our state as well? Because I noticed you were talking about your Kentucky form, but I came in late, so I'm not sure why you were
I
doing
think it
that.
has advantages if you can do it to your advantage. So if you do,
even if the form still says
do it-
owner or adopted, or
well, here's the thing, and I explain this, and I'll put this video up so you can go back and review it. But if in Kentucky, if you register at the county level, you can only register a one entity. What's it called? Crap, my brain didn't work so well sometimes after 8 p.m. Not a general partnership, a sole proprietor. Okay, you can only register the sole proprietor at the county level. Okay. Now, if you want to add more name holders, you're going to have to go to the Secretary of State to do it. If you go to the Secretary of State, there's a limited amount of what you can do. You can't do it the way we want to do it. So what you do, according to what I've read in the statutes and what I finally deciphered with the help of a very intelligent friend, was we set up a general partnership. And that general partnership can then you can do names under that general partnership that gives you the same advantages that we have with the Minnesota Secretary of State. So then you have paperwork in your state, so that's just much less of an obstacle, that much less of a pushback that they can give you. Because one of the stories I shared earlier was someone who got pulled over in Kentucky. They showed their Minnesota Secretary of State assumed name filing. The cop said, this is no good because it is in Minnesota. And he said, so if it's no good because it's in Minnesota, would you accept a Minnesota license? And the cop was like, well, yeah. Okay, so just because it's in Minnesota doesn't mean that you shouldn't accept it. So if I went to Kentucky and wanted to get a driver's license in Kentucky, but I showed a Minnesota certificate of live birth, would they let me do it? Or do I have to be born in Kentucky to get a Kentucky driver's license? And of course, the cop was like, no, you can do that. Okay, so you're just selectively choosing what will be acceptable and not acceptable from out of state. Okay. But when you go into a bank, when I went into a bank to get my business account and I showed them my Minnesota Secretary of State, they were like, well, we're a small bank. We don't have a branch in Minnesota. So our bank system can't see into the Minnesota Secretary of State. Okay. And I said, well, hell, just go to the Minnesota Secretary of State website and look me up. And she said, well, we can't do that. Our bank has to be able to see into the Minnesota Secretary of State website and that work or their database, which that is fine if you choose a bank that has a branch in Minnesota. Otherwise, they wanted something from Kentucky. And rather than trying to force the issue, I just went and got a Kentucky assumed name, business name. And I did it at the sole proprietor level in the county, which got me the accounts. But now I'm learning that I probably should have set up a general partnership and done it that way rather than going and getting just the sole proprietor thing, which actually isn't to my advantage and what I would not put in a court case. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I've heard using US Bank as your business bank is
Yes.
the best way to go because I don't know if this is true or not. Supposedly US Bank is the only true bank in the country.
I've heard that too. Like, yeah.
Plus Minnesota State uses US Bank for their billing anyway. So
Yep. Yep. And so if you go to US Bank, if you go to any bank in your state, I say your state, but your state that has a branch in Minnesota and you have a Minnesota certificate of assumed name, they're going to let you open an account, I would say.
okay.
Yeah. So, because I had that option, but there was a bank right up the road from me and I wanted that bank because it's just right up the road from me. I didn't want to go across town to the other bank that had a branch in Minnesota. And I kind of like the small town banking thing too, because the people know me. Now I can walk in, they know who I'm at. I don't have to show any ID. I just walk in, it's nice.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that answers all my questions. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Man,
I
long call. Oh, go ahead.
I was wondering about when you said how the Indians just needed to touch the ink and then the general could sign for them. Is
Yep.
that the same as with as if you were going to buy a car but you didn't want to register it? Could they sign for you to register it?
Not unless you give some form of consent. No, they can't. No. So
Okay.
let's say you and I are business partners. Okay. We have a business together and I'm on vacation. I'm up in Canada fishing. Okay. And you call me up and you say, hey, Bill, or John, as a lot of folks know me by, but hey, Bill, there is a document here. We had something come in. It needs your signature. Here's what it is. Here's the matter. Okay. I'm your business partner. Can I sign your name to it? And I say, yeah, you can sign my name to that. Okay. I've just gave consent. You can sign my name to that document. And even if somebody later comes back and says, no, that's not the right handwriting. It doesn't matter. I've given you my consent to use my name. I've given you agency, okay, to use my name. Now what you might want to do at that point is you might want to wait until I come back, write up a little form that says that I gave you permission to sign my name and have me actually sign it. That protects you, right? It really depends on how much trust. That's a big word, trust. There's a lot of trusts out there. It depends on how much trust we have, right? Because, if you trust me with enough to be in a business with me, you might trust me enough that I won't come back later and say I didn't give you permission, right? Trust me not to lie, right? So I could give you permission to sign my name and by all means you could do it, okay? So that is, there's a name for that. It's called, when you give somebody power of attorney, okay, the power to attorn. You got to go look up the word attorn, ATTORN. That's where the word attorney comes from, okay? So yeah, you could sign my name. It would be perfectly legal. And if it ever came up as a question, all you'd have to say is, we'll call him up on the stand. He'll say that I have permission to use his name, right? I could even say, hey, Jacqueline, as my business partner, I give you permission to use my name anywhere you exercise prudent judgment. Here's a stamp. And you can just stamp documents with my name, right? Because that's what attorneys do. That's what politicians do. I mean, you get a letter from the president of the United States and it's got his signature on it. It's not going to be his signature. It's going to be either a printed or an electronic signature or a stamp or something like that, right? He's given power of attorney to someone to use that name, right? So if you're in a dealership and somebody says, hey, I would like to sign this power of attorney to register the vehicle for you. And you say, no, I don't want you to do that. Then if they do that, then that's fraud. Make sense?
Yes. And then I had one more question, which on passports, they're now doing X gender markers. I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
Repeat that one more time. You kind of broke up.
On passports, they're now doing X gender markers. I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
X gender markers. X gender markers. What's an X gender marker? I don't know anything about that. What is that?
So it's where the Department of State has so they've hit another milestone, as they say, and their wording goes, in our work to better serve all U.S. citizens, regardless of their gender identity, they are now putting X gender markers on their passports or other documents, so that they could. So if when you cross security and say you have male on your passport, usually they let you in if you're a female, correct?
So when you enter into the public, when you enter into commerce, you enter into fiction. So let's look at our name, for example. William, for me, it's William Ernest Farrell II. What is William Ernest Farrell II? It's a collection of symbols and sounds. And you may have studied algebra. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? And
Yes.
so if I ask myself, who am I? And somebody points to a name and says, is this you? Well, if we go back to pure reality, pure truth, biblical, which is the only truth there is, God's truth, then there's no way that I can be a collection of symbols and sounds. It's just not possible, right? If somebody points to a picture of me, that isn't a two-dimensional image with ink made up, or maybe even a picture made of ink or oils or oil paint or whatever. Is that me? I had an FBI agent hold up a cell phone one time. It had an image of a woman on it. And he said, do you know this woman? And I said, that's not a woman. He said, then what is it then? And I said, well, it's a cell phone. I mean, I was going back to pure truth, right? In order to participate in commerce, we have to enter into fiction. The Bible gives us one instance where God tells us who that he is. He says, I am, period. I am is the shortest complete sentence in the English language. Okay. Anything you put after I am is a fiction. I am Bill. I am John. I am Jacqueline. I am Todd. I am Jessica. We're entering into a fiction. Okay. And so in order for commerce to work, we have to enter into fictions. We have to. There's no possible way. I can't contract with you if I don't know what your fictional name is. If you walk up to me and you say, hey, you man, I'm a woman. I would like to sell you this gallon of milk for $10. And I say, that would be great. Here's $10. And you say, oh, hold on. I got to run back home and get the gallon of milk. And you disappear with my $10. I don't know who to press a claim against because I've got no idea who you are. Okay. The reason for the assumed name statutes is to prevent people from doing business under a false flag. Okay. It's to prevent there being pirate ships out there. Okay. A pirate ship. If a ship is sailing on the sea, it has a flag and it has a boat number. So if it's a French flag and we have the boat number, we can go look up who owns the ship. However, if you've not registered your name, the only way we know who you are is through individual law and individual identification, which is the purpose for registering the business. If I hand somebody my assumed name certificate and I damage them in the course of our contracting relationship, they can go look up that entity in the Secretary of State Minnesota website, and it gives my address. It gives the real name of the individual, of the man or the woman, right? So they can look me up and they can find out who I am so that they can do a claim. Well, as a progression of this fiction that we know as commerce, they've gone from sex to gender. Gender is totally made up. Sex is real. Sex comes in two forms, according to scripture, male and female. Gender, your gender can be a unicorn. Well,
So
this is more commerce.
when you do your assumed name certificate, do they
Mhm.
ask your gender or your sex?
Neither. They ask for your real name and your assumed name, and the domicile, which is the address of the business. In every state that I know of, I've not checked every state. Alaska may be different, but I've not seen anything in there, because a business cannot have a gender, it can't have a sex. Okay, so if somebody points to the first, middle, last name that you're operating under, the all caps first, middle, last name, and they say, is that a male or female? It's the correct and true answer is neither. It is a business, and a business can't be male or female. Okay, what they're doing is getting us to cross a bunch of wires. This really, your question gets at the heart of a very important part of the heart of all this, which is, who are we? You know, if you identify as a lesbian African American unicorn, is that real? You know, I can identify as a horse today, and tomorrow I can identify as a man, right? Does it change anything? No, it's all fiction. It's all fiction. What am I? I am a man created in the image of God. Okay. And everything else after that is fiction. It's all fiction. And we're in a realm of commerce. That's what the fall of man is all about. In the garden, commerce wasn't needed. We had a utopia. Man has tried to create a utopia ever since the fall. And every time they try to create a utopia, they kill millions of people in horrible ways. Okay. So anytime somebody's telling you that they want to create a utopia, be very leery, because you're probably going to watch your children die. We can't create a utopia, not without God's help, because without God, we have to have commerce. And we're in this game of commerce, and this game of commerce really sucks. It's fascinating. It can be fun, but it really sucks. Okay. And so in this game of commerce, everybody's arguing over what one fiction should be over another. So when you hear people arguing and saying, oh, she disappeared, maybe. Well, maybe she can pick this up afterwards. When you hear one entity arguing with another entity over whether we should have this fiction or that fiction, just understand that it's all fiction. Okay. I'm not going to ask her if that answered her question, because she's gone. So I'm sure I know who that is. So if she has a question later, she can hit me up. Anybody else have any questions or comments or concerns or thoughts or?
Sam's last part.
Hey,
Sorry,
there you are.
I missed the last part. My phone
You
died.
reappeared. You appeared. You disappeared and then reappeared.
My phone
Oh.
died. What was the last part you said?
Well, just understand that anytime people are talking about gender or arguing about gender or what gender should be this and what gender should be that, and should these two fictional entities be allowed to marry, or should these two fictional entities be allowed to marry, just understand that you're just talking, people are arguing over whether one fiction should be allowed over another fiction. That's it.
Okay.
It's all fiction. Okay? And as men and women of faith, we should always try to live in truth. It's okay to operate in fiction. We have to operate in fiction in order to survive. We just need to understand that the fiction is fiction. It's okay to read a fiction book or watch a movie and think, oh, this is entertaining. And we can it's called reasonable suspension of disbelief. When you watch a movie or read a fiction book, you suspend your disbelief so that you can enjoy it. You have to pretend the movie is real in order to enjoy it. If the entire time you're watching a movie, you're like, oh, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake, you won't enjoy it. But when we engage in commerce, what the government wants us to do, and what other people often want us to do, is they want us to engage in unreasonable suspension of disbelief. Me thinking that I am William Ernest Farrell II, that's unreasonable suspension of disbelief. And we shouldn't engage in unreasonable suspension of disbelief, because if you think that there's purple aliens standing across the room from you, that's unreasonable suspension of disbelief, unless there are purple aliens standing across from you. But if you're engaging in an unreasonable suspension of disbelief, what's the word for that? Crazy. insane. You have to be insane to think that the world of commerce is real. It's all fiction so that we can engage with each other in this fallen world. Make sense? So there is no gender. Gender is a made up construct, doesn't exist. Okay, it's all
So
imaginary.
if someone were
It's.
if s- if someone were to ask you to autograph a document, would and the document says to put your sex down under
Uh-huh.
the like where they wanted you to autograph it, would you put that, or would you put like NA or something?
I'd probably just put NA because the sex, there is no sex. It depends. Okay. So if I'm doing something for my doctor, I'm probably going to put down male just because whether I'm male or female actually has some effect upon what happens, right? Because males and females are different. Ooh, that's a dangerous sentence in today's world, right? Males and females are different. There are things then medically that could happen with a male that you wouldn't do with a female, or vice versa, right? Because females are made different than males. If you test the testosterone of a female, it should be lower than the healthy testosterone of a healthy male. So if I were just filling out it would have to depend on the context. Okay. If there's no relevancy to what I was trying to do, like let's say that I was opening a business bank account and it was asking for the sex or the gender, I'd just mark through it because it's a business. How can a business be male or female? Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. At your age, if you go to public school or even a private school and you're filling stuff out, you could really cause these people, you could put them on a learning curve because if they're saying, okay, what's your name? And you're like, well, which name do you want? Do you want the name that I was born with, my surname and my given name, or do you want the first, middle, last name that's on the certificate of live birth? There's two different ones, right? You got two different names. And so you're going to throw a lot of confusion into that. What you need to do is learn how to have fun with it because that's where the fun kicks in, right? Just like when the woman at the courthouse told me, she said, you have to sign in cursive. And I'm like, well, what about people who can't sign in cursive? She said, they do the best that they can do. And I took her pen and I put a little dot and she said, what is that? And I said, well, that's the best I can do. I had a blast with that. That was great. Rather than getting mad, we might as well have fun with this stuff, somebody a little while back told me that they were threatened with jail. And he told the police officer, he said, jail. He said, okay, that's fine. Because that was being used as a pressure point, right? It's being used as a lever of you don't do what I say, you don't answer these questions, or I'm gonna put you in jail. And he said, that's okay. A lot of good books are written in jail. I mean, you just take the power away from them. Like that totally removed the power from that police officer because all of a sudden that thing that he was using as a weapon, he was not afraid of it, And so we got to have fun with this stuff. Yeah. So you could always say, if somebody wanted you to put your gender, you could say, what is gender? You want me to put my gender? What is gender? Define gender. And if they can't define it because they're the one asking for it, then I sure wouldn't answer it. Right. And you're going to go to a lot of confused faces because here's what people will say. They'll say, oh, you know what I mean. I do. How do you know that? How do you know what I mean? What you mean? How can I know what you mean when you're the one speaking these words? We don't have a shared language, obviously, because I just asked you what you meant. And you're saying, I know what you meant. How do you know I know what you mean? Okay, we're back to the original question. What's gender? You tell me what gender is, and I'll put my gender down. Or you could write in something like Her Royal Highness. You have to refer to me by my title. What do they call the pronouns? Oh, we want to know your pronoun. There's a kid in one high school who put His Royal Highness. Every time he got called on in class, the teacher had to call him His Royal Highness. I mean, you might as well have fun with it. It's insane. Why would you ever take anything that's insane seriously? And
So when
anybody-
they ask you,
Uh-huh.
when they ask you on your passport for your gender, what would you put?
Oh, I'd mark through it. I would put a big question mark. As a matter of fact, I have a buddy who just applied for a U.S. passport, and on there, they ask for your citizenship. You don't have to say you're a U.S. citizen to get a U.S. passport. He got a passport as a national. You know, just because there's a box doesn't mean we have to put something in it. Okay. That's the key. One of the essences for what we're studying and what we're learning is truth. And when you are living in truth, you don't necessarily fit into a box. I mean, Jesus didn't fit into a box, right? And when they did put him in a box, he rose from it 72 hours later, right? So we can do the same thing. We don't have to fit into a box. And if all you do is ask questions, then, it's going to be much better for you, because you don't want to fit into a box. Because if you fit into a box, they'll eventually put you in a box, right? Think about jail. What is it? It's a box. When you walk into court, there's a bunch of boxes. The judge is sitting in a box. The jury's sitting in a box. The court reporter's sitting in a different box. All these boxes are separated from each other, right? It's all about boxes. What's a box? It's an enclosure. What's the definition of enclosure? An enclosure is a part of something that is set off from the other part of something. So take a traffic ticket, for instance. In Kentucky, if you get a traffic ticket, it's called a Commonwealth of Kentucky Uniform Citation, and it is nothing but boxes. It's all boxes. Well, if you look at a thing called the Four Corners Rule, anything that's in a box is not part of the thing that it's on. I have 15 acres. If I put a box around a part of it, I can set that off for you to live on, give you rights to it, and it is set apart from that which it is on. Okay, you can have rights to that box. Okay, but just because there's a box doesn't mean there has to be anything in it. Okay, so anytime you're filling this stuff out, you have to ask what your end goal is. I have no problem putting my all caps name on something, and even putting an open autograph on it if it's going to meet my needs at the end and it can't be used against me. But if I'm being asked to sign a document by a prosecutor who's prosecuting a criminal case, whole other story. I'm going to do things quite a bit differently. Make sense? So
Yes.
the whole system is set up to get you to operate in fiction. It's set up to get you to operate outside of God's truth. Okay? They're pulling you into man's law, not God's law. And I don't need the law of man to tell me what I'm supposed to do. I have the law of God, and you will be governed, whether it be by God or by man. If you think you're going to skip out on both of them, you're not. And if you're going to choose the law of man over the law of God, good luck, because the law of God started out with one rule: don't eat from that tree. We broke that. Then we got 10 rules on a stone tablet. We couldn't abide by that. The Jews said, we want a king. And God warned them through Moses. He said, you don't want a king. Let me tell you what a king's going to do. Here's what a king's going to do. A king is going to do the following. Jews wanted a king. Let's read that just real quick. Israel asked for a king, 1 Samuel 8. Okay. Let's just read through this real quick, and I'll read the most important part. Okay. Okay. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. Well, this is huge. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of the chariots. Some he will assign to commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. That sound like employment? He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. Does that sound like taxes? He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Oh, there's more taxes. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and your donkeys he will take for his own use. There's more taxes. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Everything about our government is written in that paragraph right there in Israel asked for a king, 1 Samuel 8. That's what the king is doing. We have a king right now. Some may even argue that we're still under the king of England or the queen of England. Well, and I guess now it's a king. But that sentence or that paragraph right there That tells us everything we need to know about the government that we have today. And there's a sentence, there's a saying, it says, I've heard this said before, the people will get the government that they deserve. We have it. Now there's so many laws, we can't even read them all. The primary goal I had when I started studying this stuff years ago was to be left the hell alone. It's not possible. We can't do it. Can't be left alone. It's not possible. So we're going to be in a commercial game. We may as well get good at it. We may as well understand truth. And once you know who you are, then you'll know what to put in that box, if anything. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. It's 10:12. That's the longest call we've had. Man, people are going to have fun with this one. All right. I'm going to go ahead and jump off here. If y'all have any more questions, feel free to hit me up. You probably know how to get a hold of me. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and you all have a wonderful day.